I'm not mad. I'm peeved. I'm irritated. Okay. The thing is, did you listen to the podcast? I said let's make this a part one and a part two, and you kept that part in. You cut out some other stuff, but you kept that one in, and then it was just released as a full. It's a 50-minute podcast. We can't have that going on. And if it was cut up, I'd have another week to relax, not have to watch one of these movies. And you're recording? Thanks. By the way, cut this first stuff out. Just cut it to the counting, okay? That's what we're going to do. Cut it to the counting. 3, 2, 1. Hey kids, welcome back to another exciting episode of No Subs, No Dubs. I'm your host, Casey Kidd, the Kamikaze Kidd. And if you don't know what this show's about, well, this intro bit is where I tell you what I do. I watch a foreign film or an international film, whichever is less offensive these days. I watch one of these films in its native tongue, the language that it was made in, right? And then I don't watch it with overdubbing, and I don't watch it with subtitles. And then I talk about the movie and try to spoil it for you, and then try to give some sort of review. And that's pretty much the podcast. So if you're not interested in that, I don't have much else. But as I'm looking at the notes here, and holy smokes, Baka boy, I just got a whole crap load of notes. All right, this is No Subs, No Dubs. This time, we're talking about Pan's Labyrinth. So let's just get into it. First off, I want to say Pan's Labyrinth I have seen before, but I'm ashamed to admit that I've seen it with subtitles. This is something you don't want to do if you're in my business, but unfortunately, at that time, I was watching movies with subtitles, and that was many years ago, and now I refuse. I refuse to watch them with subtitles, and my contract stipulates that I'm not allowed to watch them with subtitles anymore. I don't know why I signed it, but it's something I'm not allowed to do. So, I kind of knew what was going on with this. I knew some of the visual elements. I knew the beginning, the end, pretty much. There isn't much stuff that surprised me. Some of the things came back and was like, oh, that was kind of neat to see again. So, we'll just talk about it. I don't feel like this is cheating since it's been more than 5 years since I've seen this movie. Probably more than 10, to be honest. And I didn't remember that much. I definitely didn't remember any of the dialogue, so there's nothing missing there. But I don't think it's cheating. I gotta say, there's some popular foreign films, foreign films that I've seen before, and I'm gonna have to be able to watch some of these again. That's how it's going, Baka boy, and we gotta move on, because this movie starts with the little girl, and she's dying, okay? And we see her blood going up in her nose. She's dying near this pit thing. I'll get into that a little bit later. But her blood's going back up into her nose, so it's reversed, so it's like she's remembering her life for some reason, or it's reversed for... I have no idea. Why would it be reversed for this scene? And this is just a couple of seconds in, and I keep thinking about that, and I'm like, okay. And then she's wandering some ruins. She's dying, so she's like going into her own mind, and she's wandering through these ruins. And then we have Aslan, the narrator guy, and he narrates some stuff or whatever. He's just some sort of magical narrator dude. And then we cut, and this is like in the past, right? So she's dying in the present, and then we cut in the past, and there's this whole military group driving around, and the little girl, she's with her mom, okay? So she's with her pregnant mama, and they're in a car, obviously, because they're driving around. So they would be in a car, but they're in the back, and the pregnant mama gets all sick, so she has to go out for some fresh air, and while she's thrown up outside, the little girl kind of wanders off and finds this rock, this eye rock thing, and she puts it in a statue that she just found. I was like, okay, this is interesting. So it fits in this statue, and out comes this insect that looks like it would just tear off someone's finger or something. And it looks like a praying mantis. Is that what it is? A praying mantis? And I'm like, nope, this insect came out of the statue's mouth, not good with it. And then she gets called by her mom. The mom's like, hey, little girl, come here. We gotta keep going. So they keep going. They move on. They go to this military house, basically forward deployed situation or backward. I think like they are retreating. The military is retreating, or they're fighting in the woods or something like that. So I can't tell at this point how much the people they're fighting is winning compared to the military, or how well the military is doing. Because it seems like, at least at this point, they're fighting people in the woods. So who knows how it's going. They get out of the car. Pregnant mom is all pregnant, so they get her a wheelchair and she has to sit in it. And there's this guy. I'm going to call him the pocket watch captain, or just captain. He's there. He's kind of creepy. He's a jerk. You can tell this guy is a jerk just by like looking at him, and he's so obsessed with his pocket watch. I'm not going to get into it too much, but he's always looking at his pocket watch because it's all about time, what time he has left. And here's the thing. He shakes hands with the little girl. Like, the little girl puts out her hand to shake it, and they shake awkwardly, and it's like, okay, well, you guys are friendly for the most part. It seems pocket watch guy's only interested in the pregnant lady. He's just a jerk in this. So they end up shaking hands, and it's awkward, and then she kind of wanders off again. This is like the little girl wandering movie amongst a bunch of military people and woods filled with rebels who are fighting the military people, but the little girl's going to wander off because whatever. So she wanders off. She goes to this creepy maze, and she's looking into it, and this lady named Mercedes, right? She stops the little girl before she goes in, and she's like, don't go in there. That's a creepy maze. What's wrong with... I'm the only one paying attention to you, little girl, because they're all doing military stuff. Don't go in there. Girl's like, you caught me. You caught me. I wanted to go in there, but you said don't do that. So they don't do that, and they go back to the house. Mercedes, she listens into a war planning scene. There's like war planning, and you're like, oh, Mercedes is a spy. She's listening. She's on the inside for the rebels. Okay. And then there's a scene where the doc is drugging the pregnant mama, and he drugs her, and then you find out that Mercedes and the doc are in cahoots. At the same time, the little girl overhears the rebel talk, right? So she's like, I caught it. And they catch her catching them kind of situation, but they're all like, it is what it is. No one's even paying attention to you. You ran off toward a maze, so it's okay. There's a creaking house scene. This movie's creepy, by the way. It's kind of scary. So there's this creaking house they're in. She's sleeping with her mom in the same bed, and it's all scary and creepy. And the mom's like, why don't you tell my stomach a bedtime story? Tell your future brother a bedtime story. So she gets over there, and she starts talking to the stomach, and it's a story about a blue flower. Yes, and the insects there, too. So the insects in her story as well. The insect from before, the creepy, praying mantis insect. And then we go to a scene where the captain, he's cleaning his pocket watch, and he really loves this pocket watch. He cleans the heck out of it. And it's very intricate, and this pocket watch means something to him. It's probably passed down from generations to him. Now, the thing about this is he goes out after he cleans his pocket watch, and you're like, oh, okay, he's just about his pocket watch. Well, he meets these two fellas. There's one older guy and one younger guy, so the father-dad kind of dynamic. And they're looking through their stuff, their satchels, right? And they're finding things, and they're saying some story about, like, we're here doing this, whatever. And the captain's like, well, I was cleaning my pocket watch. Now I'm very upset. So he grabs a liquor bottle, and he kills the younger guy. He just, like, hits him in the face with it a bunch of times because they had a liquor bottle, and he's like, no liquor on my property if it's not my liquor. So he hits him a bunch of times. And the older guy's freaking out, and then he shoots him and stuff. And then they open up a satchel, and they find that there's a rabbit in it. And I guess their story was, we were hunting rabbits. It was rabbit season, right? So they're hunting rabbits, and he just killed them both because, he's a psychopath. And he loves killing people, which this is the bad guy of this movie. You can tell pretty quickly, oh, this guy is not going to be good because he just killed these guys, but he killed it very, very brutally. And I guess that's war. It sucks. So they're dead. And then from there, we go back to the little girl, and her insect familiar from earlier wakes up the little girl, and she talks to the insect, and she shows a book that she was reading. So she was reading this fairy tale book on the way over, right? When they're coming over, way earlier in the scenes, they're coming over in their vehicle. She was reading a fairy tale book. Well, she shows the book to the insect, and she's like, look, it's a fairy, and the insect turns into a fairy and leads her to the maze again. So they go back to the maze where they shouldn't be, and they go into the middle of the maze. They're going around. This is the labyrinth, by the way. So I'm guessing the little girl's named Pan, but I thought Pan was some sort of bread or something in Spanish, so I don't know. But there's a labyrinth, and he goes to a pit, and then she goes down into the pit, and I'm just thinking, like, no, don't do that. This is where I stop. You go into a pit, and you're like, nah, this magical journey ends, but she's got no fear, so she goes down in it, and she starts echoing. She goes, echo. She goes, echo, echo, And I'm like, Spanish, the word for echo is echo. So I learned something today, that echo is the same in Spanish as in English, which is kind of interesting. And then this wood monster shows up, or this wood nymph guy, creature. I call him the wood monster because I don't really know what a nymph is, but he's creepy, and he gives her a quest and a book without words in it, and then he disappears. He just leaves. So she leaves as well. And then we get a scene where the captain's shaving, and then he cleans his boot, and then he gives Meredith, Meredith, jeez, I read that wrong, Mercedes, he gives her the rabbit, and he's like, make this into a stew. I've got to clean my other boot, okay? So she goes over, and she, puts the rabbit to some other lady, and she's like, you make this into a stew. And then there's a scene where the servants are making a bath for the little girl, and the pregnant lady, her mom, okay, gives the little girl a dress. And she's like, I want you to wear this dress. This is going to make you look really stunning. It's not the best dress, I'm going to say, but, it matters to her mom. So the little girl's going to take a bath, and then she's going to get in the dress and be all cute for this dinner that they're having later. Don't worry about it now, but there's going to be a dinner later. However, instead of bathing like the little girl should, she's looking into her book, and for some reason the steam comes up, and the steam makes the book show stuff finally. Like, the pages were blank, and then they start filling with all the stuff, and she's like wide-eyed and all. Oh my goodness, this book writes itself. That's awesome. Which would be pretty awesome back then. This is like the 1930s or something. So if you saw that, you'd probably crap a brick. Then, it's like a tablet. You see it and you go, wow, magic. It'd be literally insane to see a book just come to life. But that's what it does. It comes to life. And she's looking at it when she should take a bath. And then she, takes off her shirt or her sleeve or something. And she sees this moon tattoo on her arm. And she's like, I've got moon tattoo. Baka boy, dang it. It's a moon birthmark. All right? That's my birthmark. So she's got to wear her dress, and she comes down, and then she goes to where the servants are all making the food, and they all kind of laugh at her. They're like, you look like a maid. And she's like, And then she walks outside and watches Mercedes as she milks a cow for some reason. Oh, okay, cool. That's where you get milk. And then they see some smoke in the woods, and the military people see some smoke in the woods, and then the little girl just kind of goes off in the woods, even though Mercedes was supposed to be watching her, but doesn't really do it. And the interesting thing is she still has her book with her, so she's reading the book as she goes off in the woods, and I'm looking at it going, well, I can barely breathe and walk at the same time, but reading, walking, and not stumbling over and falling into something and just dying immediately, that takes some skill, is just walking around, reading, and knowing your area. But she does it pretty well. So she goes on this quest in the woods, and she finds a split tree. giant, like, tree that I wrote in my notes, a hell no tree. It's a tree you see and you go, hell no. I'm not going there. That tree is, there's nothing good coming out. You think that's a Sleepy Hollow horse comes out of kind of tree and cuts off your head. Hell no. We don't need to go in there, but she's like, I'm going to take off my pretty dress and hang it up real quick because I'm going in that tree. The book told me to, and that monster nymph creature told me I need to take this quest on. So she crawls into the tree, and there's insects and mud, and it's just a huge hell no. It's like, hell no, I'm not doing that. But she does it. And at the same time, the military goes to investigate the smoke, right? And there's like a little campfire, and then the captain, there's this thing where he sees like an antibiotic vial, and he's like, okay. And then he looks around, and he fills the fire, and he's like, this was just warm, right? It's all smoldering. And he's like, 2 minutes ago is raging. That means they're still here. So he yells out a bit in the woods, and we see that there's rebels out in the wood, and then they ride off, and that's pretty much that. Okay, back to the main thing. As the adult stories are kind of boring, let's get back to the little girl. So the little girl is in this hell no tree. Okay, she's going around, there's insects crawling on her, big insects too, and I'm like, ugh. No, I'm not about this. She sees a huge toad, the toad that looks like, I'm going to eat you kind of thing. The toad's bigger than her. It's in the middle of the tree. I did not know a toad like this existed, a toad the size of a small child. But there you go. The toad eats an insect that was on her, so it sends out this sticky tongue and then gets the insect back. And I'm like, hell no. But she's got more marbles than me. So she brought along this poisoned acorn thing. She brings this acorn, and she's supposed to poison this toad, but she knows it's like, hey, this toad likes insects, so I'm going to pick up an insect, put it in my hand, and pretty much present my hand to the toad. So the toad's tongue comes out again and grabs the insect and the acorn, and immediately just the acorns poison the toad, and the toad throws up everything and deflates and is like dead. So there's all this puke everywhere, and in the middle of the puke is a key. So she grabs the key naturally, as you would, and she pretty much leaves the hell no tree. She leaves that area, and she goes outside, and it's raining. And it's always raining in this movie, by the way. And it's like the rainiest movie I've watched. A very dreary, rainy movie. But she goes out, she sees the dress that she put up on this branch has fallen down and crumpled in the mud and stuff and got rain all over it, so it's ruined. And this isn't good. And so she goes back to the military house. Now we have a dinner scene. It's kind of boring. It's, blah, 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 adults talking and whatnot. The captain makes some sort of speech. They drink. Mercedes comes in, gets the pregnant madre, gets mama, and says, you gotta leave. You're not gonna believe what your daughter did. She rolled around in the mud a bunch. So then it cuts. Well, before the cut, there's this thing, like, there's this kind of animosity between the mom and the captain, which she must realize the captain's a jerk, and he's only looking at her because he's like, I got you pregnant, but I want a kid. So I don't think they're very much in love. That's my 2 cents there, is what I'm seeing. But pregnant mom, she leaves, and she goes upstairs and is cleaning up her daughter. She's cleaning up the little girl, and sees the dress and kind of chastises her about it. Is that the right word? Chastise? Or chastity? No, chastise should be the right word. Why is it a chastity belt? But chastise is what you do to someone. You don't chastity someone, can you? I guess you could, technically. You put something that chastities something on them. That's not what she does. She's just, don't roll around in the mud. What's wrong with you? It's raining outside. You could have gotten sick. All that kind of stuff. She's very upset. It's kind of a short scene. And then pregnant mom kind of leaves, and little girl's supposed to get dressed, shower. I was going to say shower. No, they don't shower in that situation. They just have their bathtubs that their servants fill up with hot water. So She cleans herself up and then leaves as well. Then there is a scene, after all this, there's a scene where the little girl visits the wood monster in the pit again and gets another quest. And I'm thinking, this is where the wood monster is creepy and kind of scary to me. He touches her face a little bit, and you're like, don't do that, Mr. Nymph. Don't do that. That's scary. But that's what he does. That's what he does. And I'm watching it going, little girl, get out of this situation. He touched her face. Very scary. Not good. You don't want that kind of thing going on with you. But she's like, he gave me another quest. I gotta take it now. So she takes the quest and goes back to her house. Now, the military, this is the next day. The military feeds some people. They give, like, a group of people a loaf of bread. They're like, do the rebels give you a loaf of bread? We give you bread. One loaf of bread. That's pretty awesome. So they're trying to, like, win the hearts and minds of the people, I guess. It doesn't seem to be working, in my opinion, but that's what they try to do. Now, while the military is winning hearts and minds and giving bread to people, the little girl's stuck in her book, and the book turns all red with blood and stuff, and it's like, this is not good. It fills with blood, and she's in the bathroom, and the door opens. She opens the door from the bathroom to the main room, and she sees her mom. She's all bleeding out of, her parts, right? She's bleeding everywhere, and it's like, blah. It's not good. And back then, like, you're probably dead. And spoiler alert, you're probably dead. Okay? So she's bleeding, and there's sadness and whatnot. And then the little girl is moved up into the attic to sleep in the attic where Mercedes talks to the little girl, and she hums a nice little song to her. And that song comes in later, right? And then Doc and Mercedes, they leave. They leave together in the woods. After that nice little song, they go into the woods, and they meet Mercedes' brother. They meet her brother, and it's rebel time. So there's rebel time over here. But we go back to the little girl, and she gets visited by the wood monster, and he gives her a root. He gives her a root, and he's like, this will help you. Your mom's bleeding, here's a root. But I need you to do this quest. Here's also an hourglass, but it's not really an hourglass. It's like a minute glass or something. I don't know what those are called. Are they called minute glasses? 60-second glasses? I know it goes for a few minutes, so maybe a 10-minute glass. But it's like an hourglass. You just flip it over, and it's 10 minutes or so. So he gives it to her, and he's like, this is for your next quest. Use this. Okay. Now we go back to Rebel Time. And the thing about Rebel Time is they have their, like, little wood, in the woods kind of home base. There's the military home base, which is an actual, like, house. And then in the woods home base is, like, a cave or something. And there's this stuttering Stanley fellow, and he's stuttering through reading a newspaper. And it's kind of like, well, you're trying. And someone else, like, takes the newspaper and is like, I'm going to read this. You stop reading out loud, stuttering Stanley. And then there's a situation where this guy's, like, foot's all messed up, and the doc's there. The doc's like, I'm going to have to cut off the foot. So they cut off the foot. Then it goes back to the little girl. She reads her book, gets some chalk out, and chalks up an outline of a door. And she makes a portal, and she goes in. This is a scene that, if you've seen this movie and it's been a long time, like I have, you're going to remember this scene, because she goes into this creepy hallway area with her portal stuff. And this is where it goes super, like, horror story scary. She goes into this hallway, she's walking around, there's this entrance into a dining room, and there's this big dining table, and there's this monster on the other side. The monster's not moving because he's hibernating, I guess. So he's hibernating. There's a bunch of food on this dining table. She's walking around. She picks up a saucer in front of the monster. It has eyes there. And I was like, nope, this is another hell no kind of situation. This is another hell no tree. But she's not afraid. She's got a key. Remember the key from the hell no tree? This key is important here. So she puts the saucer plate down, right? And the eyes are still there, the monster's still there, and she looks up, and there's a bunch of portraits of the monster killing a bunch of kids, and it's like, hell no, this is not a good situation. And by the way, I failed to mention it earlier, but she flipped her minute glass, okay? So her 10-minute timer thing, She flipped it over when it started and put it at the beginning, and I think it's like the sand's going so it keeps the monster hibernated, or it's the rules of the quest is you got to flip this over first and you go through your portal. So she went through the portal, did all that stuff. She's looking at the portraits, and then she sees these lock boxes kind of things, but they're within the wall, and they're keyholes, and there's these fairies flying around. They're all looking at these keyholes, and they're like, try this one. And she goes over, and she's like, it's not that one. It's this one. So she puts in the key, and she takes out a knife. And I'm like, In my mind, I went, with that knife, maybe you stab the monster through the neck before I know something's going to happen with this monster. You stab the monster, and you have the knife with you, and get the hell out of there. But she's a little girl, she's hungry, she's walking by this dining room table, and you know it's the 1930s because she looks over and she sees grapes, and she's like, I gotta eat the grape. And I was thinking, like, was there chocolate on there or something else? But she goes for the grape, and she's like chowing down on him. The monster, obviously, he wakes up, he grabs his eyes, he doesn't have eye sockets in his head for some reason. They're in his palms of his hand. So he puts the eyes one by one into his hands, and he puts his hands up over his face. And it's like he's got his hands or his eyes part. And he starts like walking like he's in Silent Hill toward her. And then he eats two of the fairies. The fairies are swirling around. They're all trying to warn the little girl, hey, there's a monster coming. What are you doing? And she's like, I'm eating grapes. Shoo, get away from me. Fairies, I ain't eating grapes. Grapes are life. And then she turns around at the last second and sees the monster. And she has like a Russell Jimmy's crap a brick moment. So she's running, and she's running away, and the monster's chasing after her. And she spent too much time eating grapes. So the portal shuts on her, and she's screwed. Luckily, she's got her portal chalk. So she uses the chalk, and she has to get up on this chair, and she climbs up the chair and does chalking on the ceiling, and is able to push through the ceiling and climb through her portal area just in the nick of time. She escapes barely, but she escapes. And the lesson there, kids, is don't eat the food. Don't eat the food on the frickin' monster's dining table. But don't waste it on grapes anyway. You know, if you're going to eat something, I was thinking she would have had better luck had she eaten the eyes first, you know? She eats the eye, smashes the eyes at least, then she just eats, and he freaks out. He's smelling around, but he can't smell her that much, and she just chows down then. Or don't eat it at all, or stab him through the neck, or I don't know. It just, get the chocolate fountain. Eat the chocolate is the idea. If you're gonna die, eat something better than grapes. Ugh. There were oranges at that table. I don't even like oranges that much, but I'd rather eat the oranges. She escaped. Now we get to some more rebel time. It's kind of boring. It's emotional, but it's just whatever. The adult stuff is mostly boring, but you get back to the captain. He is shaving again. He shaves with this straight razor kind of situation, and it's like, ugh. And that seems like one of those very kind of scary. You got to be a man to shave with one of those. I do a bic in the shower. Get a couple of the mustache hairs off. But one of those straight edge ones, ooh, that's kind of scary. And then we get to the little girl, and she plants that root. Remember the root that the wood monster gave her? She plants the root in some milk in a pot and places it under her mom's bed and feeds the root some blood because this makes her mom better, apparently, I guess. Later on, her mom's like, I'm a little bit better. And it's like, it must be because of the root that you fed blood. And the root kind of comes alive, and it's like, ugh, that's kind of scary. All right, enough of that. The next thing's like the military sees explosions in the woods, and then they find it's a train, and they're like, well, the derailed train, we're screwed. Our supply lines are down. The rebels really have us by the balls right now. And then there's some more explosions, and there's a battle at the home base. And then it's like 3 guys in the woods who are shooting at them. And the battle scene is pretty cool, I must admit. It's like you're going with it, and it's pretty intense, and they're all standing behind trees and shooting back and forth, and the captain's using a handgun the whole time, and he's pretty much doing pretty well, to be honest. I think he takes out like one or two of them. Then he goes up to the remaining survivor guy who got shot, and he's just playing with him at this point. He brings out his handgun and brings it in front of this guy, and this guy is slapping it away like, no, no. And he keeps bringing back his handgun, and then the survivor guy puts out his hand and gets shot through the hand. There's a lot of hand stuff with this. Eye hands and whatnot. Ugh. So, that's that, except Stuttering Stanley's there, and he's the actual last survivor. And Stuttering Stanley, he goes back to home base because he's going to be tortured. And boy, does he get tortured. The captain shows off his tools that he's going to torture him with, and is like, here's my hammer, here's my clipper thing, here's the thing I stab you with when I'm done. It's not fun. The wood monster then visits again. He visits the little girl, and he's all pissed off because the grapes and like two of his fairies got eaten and whatnot. So it's not good, and he's mad at the little girl, and then he leaves. Then we go back to Stuttering Stanley, and we've seen like he's been tortured, and his hand is destroyed again with the hands. So his hand's all destroyed and cut up and whatnot, and the doc's there, and the captain's like, Doc, fix him up so I can torture him some more. And the doc's like, okay. And then the doc is messing around with Stanley. And at the same time, the captain kind of sneaks in, opens up the doc's bag, pulls out an antibiotic vial. And I was like, oh, this looks like the other vial. So he goes over and he checks out the vials, and he's like, aha, I caught you. And I was thinking, like, don't vials kind of look the same, but maybe in the 1930s they all have their own different imprint? I have no idea. So it's like, okay, well, if the vials look the same, if you're the doc, wouldn't you just be like, that's just a traditional medical vial, it could have been anybody. But who knows, maybe he wasn't that fast on his feet. But while the captain is inside the house, he hears some scuffling noises up in the bedroom where his wife is, or girlfriend, or the pregnant mama, right? He goes up there, sees the little girl, and she's under the bed, and she's messing about, so he's like, what are you doing? And she comes out, he drags her out, and she's all screaming about it and stuff, yelling, and he brings out the root, and the root's there, and he's like, this is witchcraft, what is wrong with you? And he's getting mad with her, and then mom comes out, and she's like, what are you doing? And she's like, it's magic, it's magic. Mom's like, little girl, magic isn't real. And she throws the root into some fire. And as like to show immediately that the root was doing something, she immediately like starts in a lot of pain. But the captain's already gone by this point, just so you know. So he's still not there. And the little girl just witnesses this and is like, and no, this sucks. Mom, why'd you throw the root down there? But she did. So, the captain goes back to torture Stanley some more, but at this point, the doc has actually killed Stanley through an injection. So, the captain is really PO'd about this, and he's looking at the doc, and he's like, you're not on my side. And the doc kind of leaves and stuff, and he's like, what about the vial, doc? And the doc's leaving, and then he comes out and he shoots the doc, and the doc dies as he's walking away. That kind of situation. After the doc is dead, the pregnant mom, she goes into labor, but she dies. So there's a funeral after. I mean, they kind of wait there, but she dies pretty quickly. So there's a funeral, and the captain's holding the baby, and he's like happy that he's got the baby. I think that's the only thing he cared about was having spawn. So he's got his spawn there. And then there's this scene, okay? I didn't get into it at all, but there's a storeroom, and the storeroom gets unlocked, and the captain's always like, why is something getting unlocked? This is curious. And then he notices it's Mercedes, who should have had the key, but somehow the rebels are getting stuff from the storeroom, it's because of her. So he kind of lightly interrogates her. He kind of just does that thing where he's like, hey, what about this key? Just to see her response, and she kind of holds it together, and she gets the key from him, but she's like, I gotta leave tonight, so she gets her stuff to leave, and when she's getting her stuff to leave, she goes and gets the little girl, and they start to leave, but when they're on the run, they get caught, and when they get caught, the little girl goes up to the attic. Mercedes, now she goes into the torture room. This is where the captain got a little cocky. He turns his back to Mercedes so he can do the whole talk about his tools situation. But Mercedes, she had a knife on her, so she cuts the ropes. And when she gets free, the captain is talking about like his stabbing unit, and he's going to turn around. Well, she stabs him in the shoulder and brings it down. And he's like, so he turns around, she stabs him again. And then she puts the blade in his mouth, right? And she makes him half a Joker. Okay, so she cuts him up pretty good. And then she leaves. She runs for the woods. She's chased by these military people on horseback, which isn't fair, to be honest. Like this whole group of horseback military people. And they go up there, and the captain's wanting her alive because he wants to torture her now. He's mad. And, his face is all messed up. He's been stabbed twice. They all surround her on horseback. And she's there, and she's bringing out the knife, like, I'll fight you. And then she realizes, no, I can't. So she puts the knife up to her neck, and the guy gets down, and he's like, don't do that. And she realizes, like, I put it up to my neck, and it's a Spanish standoff, basically. She has the knife to her neck, and he's ready to, take her in. And when he's walking toward her, he gets, like, shot up. And that's when the rebels do their attack, and they shoot up a bunch of them. And she survives because the rebels helped them out and spooked all their horses and everything, so they run away. Now, the little girl, like I said, is locked up. She's locked away. And this is when the wood monster visits yet again for one last quest. Steal your brother. So she's like, okay, I'll steal my brother. And I guess he unlocks it for her or something, or she crawls out the window. I don't know how she gets out, but she gets out. All right. So, at this time, we get the captain. He's stitching up his own face in front of the mirror that he kept shaving at. That's pretty intense, and he's taking shots of liquor because he's, like, stitching up his face, So you gotta get a little bit drunk or a little bit warm in the face to make this possible. And we see the little girl, and she's down there in this room, this basement area with him. She's hiding, and he's stitching his face up, and then there's this side character comes in, and he's like, hey, the rebels are attacking, you might want to come out and see. And he's like, damn it. So he goes out there, and he's going to see that they're attacking and everything. And this is when the little girl goes over and picks up her baby brother. Half brother, technically, but still her baby brother. She goes, steals the baby, and then the captain comes back, and she's kind of hiding around, and there's an explosion, and the captain sees her holding the baby, and he is pissed. He's like, I just had half my face cut off. I look like a monster. I just was sewing up my face so I don't look completely like the Joker. And you steal the baby? You steal my spawn? I'm going to come after her. I'm going to come after you. So he comes after her. He goes after her for a bit, and they go into the maze, right? And she knows the way, but the maze kind of opens up for her, and he's kind of wandering around drunk and pissed, and she goes to the pit, and at the pit, she sees the wood monster, and the wood monster is like, remember that knife? This is the time for you to use that knife on the baby, and the blood will spill into the pit, and there's a rock in the pit, and it'll make the rock turn magical, and I don't know, you'll get your mom back if you do that. Just sacrifice your baby brother. And she's like, nah, I don't want to do that. And at the same time, the captain kind of wanders in and sees the little girl's talking to nothing. And he's like, oh, this is scary. I need my baby now, But he didn't realize, like, she said no. She said, I'm not going to sacrifice the baby. That's not good. So the captain comes over and gets the baby from the little girl, first off. And then he has the baby. He's got the upper hand. He's a bigger guy, too. He didn't need to do this. Shoots her. I'm going to off you anyway. I don't like you. I didn't like you from the start. My face is all messed up. So he starts to walk away, she falls over, and that's the beginning. Remember the very beginning where she's dying? This is what you're getting at. You're there again. She's bleeding out. Now, Captain, walks out of the maze, and all the rebels are there. And he's like, I'm overpowered. This is the thing I remember, because I remember kind of this being like, oh, that was harsh. Well, not harsh. I remember it being like, oh yeah, they're G's for doing this. He comes out, and he's so obsessed with his pocket watch, okay? So he wants to give the baby the pocket watch, and he's like, tell him I died at this battle. I think there's something similar to what he said. And he gives over the baby to the rebels, to Mercedes, and Mercedes is like, we won't even tell him your name. And then they shoot him through the cheek. And I'm like, oh, and he dies. Okay, so the baby doesn't even get the pocket watch, which is like, they could still give the baby the pocket watch. Just don't say who's it from, you know? Oh, it's a nice pocket watch, and it was cleaned very nicely. But they don't want to do that. So the rebels, they come into the maze, and then they find the little girl. Mercedes is very upset about this, so she hums that song that she was humming before to make the little girl calm. She hums her as she hums her. She's humming as the little girl dies, and the little girl dies, and she goes to heaven, and her mom and dad are there, and the wood monster, the wood nymph, is there as well as like a little servant guy. And they're like, you did everything you needed to do. You need to die. That was the last quest, and now you're with your family, and your baby brother is with the rebels. And I was like, okay, so that's how it's gonna be. This sucks. And she's bleeding, and blood comes down into the pit because she didn't sacrifice the baby. Her blood did the sacrifice, and it made the stone all like, getting its blood that it wanted. And then she pretty much goes off into this weird heaven world. It's kind of creepy, and there's cheering, and I'm not quite sure if it's... I guess the wood monster was good the whole time, but he was kind of scary, and her parents are there, so that's good. And then you get to the Hell No Tree. That's like the last thing. The Hell No Tree is there, and a flower blooms on it. And that's the end. Holy smokes, this one went way too long too, Baka boy. You're gonna cut this down? We can't say part 1, part 2, can we? Well, I can say part 1, part 2, I just don't think you're gonna do it. Yeah, some of these episodes might be a little bit longer. There was a lot of stuff to unpack in that. Yeah, so the review part. This movie was good. It was depressing, that's for sure, right? It looked good. It was kind of that magical realism, very interesting. It was a good adult children's story. It was very depressing. Some of the stuff was really interesting, and I think some of the CGI kind of didn't hold up, but the insects kind of did as well. You could pretty much follow everything that was going on. I would not say it was the most enjoyable movie that I've watched so far, but it was a very good movie. I have no idea what I want to say with it. The music was really good. The acting was really good. It sticks with you. There's some images. Definitely that scene, that whole dining situation with the eye monster coming up after her. That's one that's gonna stick with you for a while. That was completely messed up. And the ending stuck with me. Cutting his face. There was some super intense violent scenes, but at the same time, there's a little bit of kind of boring, dialogue heavy, adults talking kind of stuff, where I thought the better stuff was with the kid. So if it was just the kid the whole time, and you didn't even see like any other perspectives, I'd actually have enjoyed that movie more. And you're kind of guessing with it, to be honest. I think it's hard for it a soft 5. I'm going to go with that. It was not a pleasant movie. It was a very depressing movie toward the end. I guess she kind of gets she goes to heaven, which is good, and she sees her mom and dad again. But it was still a super depressing movie. It was a good movie, but not something I really want to go watch again. How's that, Baka Boy? You said my reviews are the worst. that the whole point of this is like the spoiler part, and when it gets to my review, it's like I'm just lazy about it. You cut that out too. It's just part where I say I'm just lazy about it. You're lazy about it. You need to cut this down. Make sure this is a less than 50-minute podcast. Holy smokes. How much stuff did I repeat or just not need? Like this whole section at the end. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say. Hard 4, soft 5. Pretty damn good movie, depending on if I want to get super depressed watching a movie. Technically, one of the better movies I've seen out of all these movies. Is really good piece of art. It's a very beautiful movie. It's a very harsh movie. You can tell there's like symbolism. There's thought put into let's keep damaging the hands. Let's keep doing certain things certain ways. Characters all have kind of tells, and you can be like, okay, this character's important. And you can follow the strands of it. No one's getting like all confusing with it. It's a powerful story, but it's definitely a depressing story. So that's why I give it like 4, hard 4, soft 5. Anyway, if you want to follow along on Twitter at twitter.com/no-subs-no-dubs pod, P-O-D, or go to patreon.com/no-subs-no-dubs. And also keep with that triangle plan. We got to get more people listening. One person tells 2 other people. 2 other people tell 2 other people each, and we'll build a triangle of fans who end up propping up the show. I call it the triangle plan, and it is brilliant. I've never heard of a plan that does anything of the sort. So really, this show is going to do much better with word of mouth. Try your best to maybe reach out to a rich friend. Tell them that No Subs, No Dubs is on Patreon. And, link them that way. $2 a month, 4 shows hopefully a month. That's like 50 cents a show. That's pretty much worth it. Or just go free. But if you go free, tell some of your rich friends. Guilt them into throwing $2 down this hole. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. I'm Casey Kidd, the Kamikaze Kid, blown up all over this bitch. Take it away, Baka Boy. And one of those, kind of aside, I was just thinking about it. This is a Spanish movie where they're in Spain, so they all have a lisp. They all like that, with their C's and S's. There's a lady named Mercedes. I think she's like the main one that I caught her name because they keep saying her name over and over. She's kind of the help nanny person in this a little bit later. And they're saying Mercedes. And I was really wondering, is that some sort of, I, I don't want to say cultural thing, because obviously it's a cultural thing or a language thing, but is it at this point, like, since they learn how to say S, like, with kind of, whether, you're lisping everything, is it impossible for a Spaniard to say an S? Like, since they learned the language with a TH, is an S impossible for them to pronounce? Or can they learn that in the future? Or is it so ingrained in their mind and their culture? I don't know. This